Hey, Archie, I have heard that cognitive decline is one of the biggest risks that retirees have in their retirement years.
It is a big risk, Rob, and it's not just a health risk, it's also a financial risk. I'm Archie Hoxton.
And I'm Rob Hoxton.
And this is Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. Welcome back to the Last Paycheck Podcast, brought to you by Hoxton Planning and Management. We're your hosts, CFP professionals Archie Hoxton and Rob Hoxton. And today, the topic we're going to discuss is kind of a sad topic, sort of a downer, but it's really important. And it's cognitive decline. This is something that happens to people in retirement. It comes for most of us if you live long enough. But it's, given that this podcast is so often we're talking about retirement and maximizing your financial life throughout retirement, this is really important. And it's something that, like I said, most people are going to face.
It's a risk that is often overlooked. I mean, when we think about retirement planning, we are often thinking about risks like investment risk. But this is a real risk that isn't often thought of. It's even less frequently talked about openly.
Yeah.
And it's a really, really difficult one to broach with your ailing parents or your aging parents.
Right.
So we wanted to kind of talk about that. And, we'll talk a little bit about what we see in the practice that we have in helping people retire and stay retired. Some of the things that we see and some ideas that we might have.
Yeah. And it's so important because what we've found through sort of planning this episode was that in a way, it's a non-financial risk that it's also kind of a financial risk too. I mean,
Yeah,
it has
definitely.
financial implications if you're not planning for it. And I think part of the problem is that so often if you start to have cognitive difficulties and memory loss, it's easy to just not even know it and not be aware of it.
Right.
Others may notice, but you may not.
Well, and now, it's probably more of a problem now than it may have been for earlier generations. Because if you think about it, we're living longer
Right.
than prior generations. And the decisions that we make when we're older, particularly financial decisions, can have a greater impact on our outcomes, right? Because not only are we living longer, but we also don't have as many guaranteed sources of income. Back in the day, maybe in our grandparents' days or great-grandparents' days, they often retired with a pension.
Right.
Right? So you got a check every month in the mail, just like you might get from Social Security. And you didn't really have to worry about how the money was invested. That was somebody else's responsibility.
Right.
So now we have these decisions that we have to make about our investments when we're getting older,
Right.
that we didn't have to make a few generations ago.
Yeah. I mean, the retirement plan back in the day was fairly simple. If you worked, maybe you worked for the same company your entire life, you retire, you get the gold watch maybe, and you get the pension, and you just keep doing what you were doing your entire life, just without work. But now you've got 401ks, you've got IRAs, you've got investment accounts, and the only guaranteed source is Social Security. So there are so many important decisions that you have to make from when you first start working until the day that you pass on or are unable to manage it yourself and a power of attorney takes over.
What about the study you and I were talking about, you brought to my attention? I didn't know whether you were hinting that maybe I should read the study twice or something in case I forgot. But the University of Michigan Health and Retirement Study, which was highlighted in an article in the Wall Street Journal recently, was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it was. I mean, essentially what the study did is it surveyed people over 50 and in the US, and they were really looking at trying to figure out what the effect of memory loss is on your finances.
And how prevalent it is.
Right. So every 2 years, participants rated their ability to remember things.
And this was no small group either. This was 20,000.
20,000 people.
Yeah.
Age 50 and over.
From all, it's kind of a demographic cross-section of the country, not just wealthy, poor, it was a demographic, representative demography, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what they found was that more than 60% of the sample experienced at least one severe memory loss event during which their memory scores decreased by 20% or more. That's a pretty significant decline, and that's also a significant number. I mean, 60% of people experiencing an event, 20% memory loss. That's serious.
Yeah, I mean, if there are three people sitting at a table, two of them are experiencing it.
Right, to some degree. They happen, on average, at age 67 and often before retirement. So this is interesting because if you're thinking about memory loss and saying, well, I've got time, that's way down the road. That's something that doesn't happen until, I'm not going to have to worry about that until I'm in my 80s, right? It might not be the case. It might actually come on a lot sooner than you'd expect.
Yeah, and what's really a little frightening about it, I mean, it's frightening to think as you get closer to retirement age and you realize that the likelihood that you'll have cognitive decline in the foreseeable future is quite high. What's really frightening about it, in my view, is that if it happens to you, you may be unaware of it.
Right.
And that's where it's really dangerous.
But it kind of makes sense. I mean, if you experience sort of a memory loss event, or you don't remember something, you might not, it's easy to be unaware of something that you don't remember, right? And I think it's important to keep that in mind. I mean, if you forget to do something, you aren't going to realize that you forgot to do that thing until someone either brings it to your attention or it sort of pops back into your awareness somehow. Like you find your to-do list where that thing was written down and, it's not crossed off or something. Oh, did I forget to do that? So you can imagine that, but magnified. And maybe it has to do with a financial decision.
The normal decline that comes with aging is pretty noticeable, though. Like not being able to recall names as quickly as maybe you once had, or forgetting, or trying to do some sort of complicated intellectual sort of puzzle, some task that requires a great deal of focus may not be as easy, or it may be more taxing. These are things that as people age, they begin to notice about themselves. But when it happens in one of these substantial events, like this study is referring to, there's something about that really significant decline, 20% or more, that is harder for the person to realize this happened, and it makes them so much more vulnerable.
Right.
The research suggested, and I'm just looking at my notes here, that unaware seniors saw substantial wealth declines compared to seniors who were more aware.
Right.
Why might that be?
Well, if you're aware, I mean, if you know that your memory is in decline and your cognitive abilities aren't what they used to be, you might be more likely to bring in a trusted person to help you.
Yeah.
You might be less likely to make significant financial decisions by yourself, because you're going to know, okay, I can't exactly, do this how I always have. And there are so many ways that this study cited, ways that people lose that wealth that they're talking about, which, by the way, the average decline in wealth was $31,000. for seniors who were unaware. That's no small number. I mean,
and most pronounced, interestingly, among people in the upper 25% of wealth accumulators
right,
who were also active in the stock market.
right,
And they surmise, or they guess, I think, that those people probably were very cognitively high functioning people prior to the events. And so they had a really high level of confidence in their ability.
right,
That matched with a lack of awareness that the event had occurred, put them in a really, really bad position.
right. Because if you're pretty active in your investments, and particularly stock investments, and you're someone who is trading frequently, maybe someone who is trying to time the market, which on its own already can create more loss than is needed, than is necessary as an investor. You pair that with a memory loss event and
overconfidence,
and that those numbers start to make a lot more sense.
Yeah,
as far as the losses go.
Archie, this is an issue that, as you know, we are dealing with our clientele. In fact, this week, I had a Zoom call with a client and her daughter, and I was actually contacted by her daughter. I hadn't noticed that she had experienced any sort of decline in her cognitive ability, but her daughter had. And so we had this long conversation about what would be best to do to protect mom from herself. Now, she's a single woman in her late 80s, and her daughter justifiably was concerned. And even though we didn't notice that in this case, we experience this frequently, where we notice that our longtime client we may have served for 25 or 30 years just isn't the same. And you can see that in personality changes, in ways that they interact with us, in the way that they make decisions. We see it in sometimes in requests that they make, where they've got a new friend. And we begin to wonder, is there some elder abuse or some sort of swindler or criminal activity going on where they're being taken advantage of? And so,
a trusted person, who is not trustworthy, but they trust, and who it would seem natural to trust. That happens too.
Yeah. A few years ago in our paperwork, we started adding a form where we can ask our clients to give us the name and contact information of someone we can call if we begin to observe these characteristics. Now, we're not mental health professionals by any stretch.
Right.
But anybody who's watching this that's dealt with people who are aging has possibly encountered somebody who they thought, they're not on their game.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the things that the viewer or listener might want to consider is, if you are that aging person, think about who you trust, family member or professional or whatever, who you can lean on, or you can count on to help you from making mistakes.
Right.
Consider using a durable power of attorney document where you appoint somebody as your power of attorney that acts on your behalf if you're not able to make decisions yourself. And if you do that, make sure that you tell the person that you've named as the power of attorney that they are your power of attorney. Give them an original signed copy of it, and also give copies to your financial institutions. Because if something happens to you and the holder of that power contacts the institution, and the institution doesn't know that they are the power of attorney, then there's going to be a bit of time that has to transpire before they can actually act on your behalf. So these are things that you might want to consider doing in advance, right?
Right. It's also something that you want to talk to a lawyer about first before making any decisions like that. We're not lawyers,
Yeah.
so
You can draft.
that's something to think on and talk to your lawyer about for sure. Because that is one of the most surefire ways to give someone the authority to act on your behalf if you're, becoming, a risk to yourself through that loss of cognitive ability.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and maybe have someone that you trust who can actually, take care of your investments and help you or your power of attorney make financial decisions that are in your best interest. Fiduciary, financial planner, or something of the like. That's really, really important too, to avoid those mistakes that we talked about in the study.
Yeah, serious stuff for sure.
Yeah,
Something to be mindful of and to plan for.
Yeah. Well, I think that just about covers everything that we had for today. But if you like this and you want to learn more, please leave a comment, like, subscribe, share with your family and friends. And you can also reach out to us directly with the number on the screen. And we'll hope to talk to you next time. You've been watching Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. If you like this show, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Last Paycheck is available anywhere you get your podcasts.